Hey everybody, it's David here. We're going to get underway in just the next few seconds. There's lots of people joining here right on our start time. So I'll just let everyone get settled in. Hopefully you can see I've started screen sharing right from the get-go. I'm flying solo today because this is a little more informal than our town halls. And I'm going to get very practical on some things around topic creation and online creation. I've opened the Q&A panel on my screen. So if you have questions as we're going, just drop them in to the Q&A panel and I'll answer them as we're going. And if I get caught up in something, I will see your question eventually and get to it. We've still got lots of people joining right now, so I'm just going to let everyone get settled in. Today I'm focusing on text, and to get straight to it, I don't think text is a bad thing, and I want to make sure that's really clear as we go through the session today. When you're working online, text is quick and easy to create. It's easy for a lot of people to consume. It's easy to update. It's easy to go through at your own speed and reread and do it at your own pace. If you're working within the tribal habits environment, it's easy to capture things into the journal as well. People can copy and paste things as private notes, or they can tag stuff to go into their journal. So there's lots of great reasons to use text. I guess today what we want to look at is either overuse of text, or to make sure that we're not losing engagement, because text is probably the most passive, least interactive way we can engage someone. So it's really that balance that we're looking for. Over the last few weeks, we've been fine-tuning a lot of the algorithms that drive Sage. So if we just flip over into the creator area, Sage has had a massive upgrade recently. And if I ask her what she thinks of this part, several of the rules she's using are around text. And we've spent some time over the last 18 months kind of analyzing good ratios of text to imagery or text to interaction. And we've got some proprietary kind of numbers we're running in the background to look at when we think there's an appropriate balance of text versus other elements. So as a starting point, asking Sage what she thinks and looking at some of her rules might give you a sense as to whether you're on that right balance. I'm going to work through 4 parts today, and I'm going to start with just text basics and formatting. And then I'm going to look at more detailed stuff around interactions and really taking advantage of some of the things in the system. Then some text engagements, probably my favorite way of using text, and then just to cover off on insights. I'm going to be switching between preview or explorer mode and over in creator mode, where we look at how things were actually put together. Let's begin. The first thing I'm thinking about is kind of load we're placing onto explorers. So when an explorer opens a new section of content, be it in tribal habits, or in traditional online learning, kind of a legacy system where you've got slides with next and backs, they see an amount of information, and that places kind of load onto them to take that in, analyze it, and work with it. And if I look at this section here where it's just a wall of text, that is a lot of load to put on someone. When they see this presented like that text, I can tell you right now they're going to skip. No one can read this. It's too hard for them to actually break it down and engage. And so the first thing I'm thinking about is this concept of a page. And so when someone kind of goes to the next section of content, I'm thinking, is there about a page of text? This is more than a page of text. It's too much for me to take in one go. So I want to be cutting this down, just like we're thinking about a book or a novel where we can look at a page of text and I can absorb that effort. And then when I get to the end of it, I have a period where my working memory can potentially transfer something to long-term memory, or I can take a breath and I can hit this next up button and reload to engage again. So one thing I could do here, and I'm going to work with some text out of Wikipedia today. It's from the Wikipedia article on textbooks, and I've just copied some text in to work with. I could take this and just break it into 2. So what I've done here is I've taken the same text, I put in just some paragraph breaks, and then I've split it into 2 sections. So all I've done is I've put in a section break here, and I haven't put in a section heading in terms of any content. So if I switch back to creator mode, you can see that my section that I've put in is blank. It is just putting in the section there. That does 2 things. It puts in the next up button, but also in tribal habits, we put in a banding, a gray-white banding between each section. And this banding helps with the load issue. It helps people kind of see there's just this much text here I need to absorb, and then I get a break. And then I can go down to the next section and absorb the next bit of text. So often if I just have a ton of text, I'm looking to put in kind of those section breaks to do the gray-white banding. Is a very simple thing. Next, I want to think newspaper length formatting. So when you look at a newspaper, it puts in a lot of paragraph breaks. In fact, in a newspaper, often there's a paragraph break after every sentence. And so I'm trying to think that my paragraph should really just be 1, 2, or 3 sentences at most. More paragraph breaks than we might be used to doing if we're working in something like Microsoft Word. That's because working on the screen is a little bit harder for most people than working with paper. And by breaking it down, we make it a little bit easier. Now, when we designed Tribal Habits, we worked very hard on the width. We did a lot of research and reading about the optimal width on a screen, and it's about 65 characters per sentence, which is why we kind of really control the width here. And then we encourage you to put in lots of breaks. And so we're going to put in lots of breaks. We're going to use lots of bullet points. So this here, the history of textbooks, that part there is 1 sentence and then 1 sentence per bullet point. If I go back up, that's a lot easier to read than this wall of text here. It's the same content. All I've done is just put in those paragraph breaks. So you can compare this paragraph to that paragraph, same content, just formatted up better, reducing the load, making it easier for people to absorb what's there. Next, let's think formatting. Another good thing you can use in formatting is our quote paragraph style. It adds in a little quote format and kind of pops a sentence or two. I use this a lot to break up a long paragraph. I pick out the most important sentence in the paragraph and put it in the quote styling. And that breaks this whole paragraph here into these 3 smaller paragraphs, popping the most important bit. And so if I just have a look at how I did that here in creator mode, I can select a sentence, it's under paragraph style, and it's the quote style. So if I want to change that around, I could take the quote off this one and put quote onto the top one to break it up that way. I use this quote a lot. Most sections have one of the little quote styles in the paragraphs of text I'm working with to pop the most important thing. Next, let's think about formatting. So when I'm thinking about formatting, I'm talking about things like bold, italic, and colors. And whenever I'm using formatting, the very first question I'm asking is the formatting reducing the load or increasing the load? So sometimes when I'm reviewing topics where people have submitted for review in Tribal Habits, I feel like the formatting is increasing the load. Because every time you use a new type of formatting, subconsciously, the learner is thinking, why is it formatted like that? What's that new style used for? Is there a consistency here? What's the formatting trying to do? If they start to consciously think about your formatting, then actually you've added load to them because they're now absorbing the content and also wondering what's going on with the formatting and trying to work it through. So I only want to use formatting to reduce the load, to make it easier for them to digest things. Usually less is more. So I've taken this paragraph of text here and I've turned it into this paragraph of text. And let's look what I've done. I've used selectively italics on the Gutenberg Bible twice to highlight that. It's consistent. So when they see it the second time, they're like, okay, he's just doing that thing to make that proper noun or technical term stand out. I've used quote once and I've used bold once to highlight a key bit of information, and that's more than enough. This is definitely more than enough formatting. And I'm trying to do it in a way where it's helping them realize that's the important bit, so focus on it. And bold's one of those things you can only use once. If you use it too much, it loses its prioritization that it's trying to build in. So less is definitely more. Same with color. So I want to talk about color. So we introduced color formatting in Tribal Habits maybe 6 months ago. And I've seen great uses of it and some uses that I feel actually increase load. So first of all, some colors are really hard for people to read. If you're colorblind, you find it really hard to work with greens and reds and other colors. So I'm only using color really if I absolutely positively have to. And I only want to use color where it enhances the learning. So in this advice impact here in this second sentence, let's say I was talking about the capture of an image that had a blue wire in it. Putting the word blue in blue, that makes total sense. It's helping me relate, okay, this message is about the blue wire. In the image, I see the blue wire. It's actually enhancing the learning. However, if I just colored the word wire for some reason, that's not improving the learning. I don't know what it's trying to achieve. It's just creating styling for the sake of styling. So when we're using color, I want the color to make sense with the learning. I really see only a few instances for this. where you actually are talking about color, a blue wire, a blue table, and you want to highlight the word in blue to help them make the connections. Correct or incorrect are good examples for that. So if something's a mistake, putting the key thing they shouldn't do in red, I get that. That's helping drive the red is danger reinforcement. Or if in your topic, you've got some concepts and you want to color code those concepts and you're going to only use the color when talking about that concept throughout that entire topic. And that it's important for people to understand differences in concepts. So you're using color to reinforce difference. That makes total sense as well. But for instance, if I just look at this paragraph here, where they've just kind of gone to town with colors and they've added in a whole bunch of different formatting, I find this very hard to take in as a learner. It's actually increasing the load on me. I'm trying to figure out what's what. There's a lot of change here. Why is that underlined? Why is that in bold? Why is this in gold? This is too much. This has gone way too far. You know, comparing this paragraph here to that paragraph there, you know, there's only so much load a learner can take on. Now, these things seem like really basic things, but looking at all the topics we review, I think just pointing these things out at the start can just help reduce clutter. Less is more when it comes to text formatting as a starting point. One final thing on text formatting. So I see a lot of people copy and paste stuff from Word, and we do need to talk about that. So browser formatting does not equal desktop formatting. So the way something is formatted on Microsoft Word is very different to the way it's formatted in HTML. So I'm going to go over to Microsoft Word, and in the background here, I've got some text, which I'm just going to paste in to our text editor. And it's recognizing that the content is coming from Microsoft Word, and it's asking me to clean the formatting or keep it. I'm going to keep it just for the moment. So I'm going to allow the platform to take the desktop formatting. You can see here, it doesn't look great. It's trying to use the fonts from the desktop, but desktop fonts don't always work in browsers. And it's got the line formatting really wrong. So just the formatting doesn't work. It's got different line heights for here. It's very hard to read this as well. So I'm going to take that out and I'm going to paste it in and I'm going to hit clean instead. It's going to strip all the formatting out and just leave me with anything that is compatible with the browser. And I can then go back and start to add in formatting using our own editor. And that's going to put in formatting in a way that suits a browser. So I'm very nervous about people just copying and pasting and keeping their formatting, trying to use the special fonts they've got or whatever, because it can be a very inconsistent experience for your learners because browsers can interpret that font very differently between browsers and have trouble with it. It also embeds behind the scene a whole ton of extra coding to try and make that formatting work. So if possible, paste as clean text, or you can right click and paste as plain text, and it will just kind of drop in all the text without any formatting, and then go back and reformat it using the tools in here. As you can see in these sessions, I'm going to move at a reasonably rapid pace because we are talking best practices stuff here. If you've got questions as I'm going, feel free to whack them in the Q&A or just use the chat. If you've got chat panel open, I can see a few people said hi to me as we got going. Let's set aside some of the text formatting and have a little bit of a look at what we can do now that's more exciting once we have the text formatted correctly. And the first one is text interactions. So here I want to look at ways to make text more interactive. So once again, I'm going to work with this text out of Wikipedia. So what I've done here is I've just taken that same text and gone to town on proper formatting. So I've now used our bordered paragraph style to create some headers. I've used some bullet points. I've used just a little bit of bolding or italics where I think it's appropriate. And you can see this text here is a lot more readable than that first wad of text we had. It's all the same stuff. It's just presented nicely, but it's still a lot of stuff. And so I'm thinking here, I've got 4 kind of groupings of text: early use of textbook, Socrates and stories, the impact of the printing press, and the growth in public application. Let's see how we can make it more interactive. So the first thing I'm thinking about is using our interact element. So if I just switch back into creator mode, the interact element is probably my favorite for text. It's this one here. It allows you to create 10 items of text and images and lay them out in different ways. And so here I've taken that same information and I've laid it out using the accordion layout. So it's still text, but someone has to click through to get it. So we're getting a little bit of engagement as they click. More importantly, we're reducing load because we're only showing them one part at a time. So it's much easier for me to focus on this one bit of information than it is to focus on the whole thing. This little movement, the accordion thing, I think also kind of acts as a flow in the mind of the explorer. And I quite like this accordion layout when I'm thinking flow. So if I'm explaining steps in a process, I often use accordion because it's like step 1, now we flow into step 2, now we flow into step 3, and we kind of work our way through that way. So accordion is fantastic for demonstrating one bit of information in a flow. So steps in a process, chapters in a book, something like that. I also think it's good when you have a lot of text because it's a great way to kind of hide and restrict that. I can use a similar layout with lists, so that's a different layout. Here it's similar to what I did earlier, but it's laying them out with a number. We have 3 list views in Interact: number, letter, or bullet. I've chosen number here, so it's giving them a number. It's sliding them in as I go to, just to create a little bit more interaction. So I use this list layout when I'm doing top 10 lists, 4 bits of advice, or even 4 steps, and I just want to lay it out a little better. Alternatively, if I have smaller bits of text, I use buttons or flip cards. So I like using buttons when I have very small headings and a reasonably small amount of text. And what I like about this is it kind of keeps the element the same size. It's still hiding the amount of text that I've got. And I like this kind of visual layout as I'm moving backwards and forwards here. So here I'm kind of describing different things that people can do in the markets for selling textbooks, different ways to sell textbooks. So it's a little bit of a comparison. It's a little bit of definitions versus information. So there's a relationship between the title and the information. And it's good when I've got a reasonably small amount of text all about the same length. Flip cards work the same way. So flip cards kind of show bits of information as I click on them. Again, it's hiding information and only revealing little bits of information at a time. The difference with flip cards is, though, it's hiding one side of the card. So here I can see the word buyback as I read buyback. But here I see the word buyback, then I see what it means. I like this interaction when I want a really strong linkage between what's on the front of the card and what's on the back. And I want to actually increase the load a little bit to make them think what was on the front, what's on the back. That could be very handy when reinforcing definitions. So they see the word on the front and the definition on the back, and they've got to rethink, okay, what was the word on the front? And I'm improving that little linkage in the learning process for them. Or scenarios. So on the front of the card, I'm putting, what would you do if, or here's the scenario, click on the back and they see the answer to it. So this is where I want to have a separation between the title and the content to make it actually make them think through that. So that's what the flip card one is particularly good for in text here. Next up, if you want to get really creative, you can use hotspots. Hotspots are a great way to hide text or to relate text to an image. So here I've used the hotspot element and I've created our 4 parts of text and I've given them 4 numbers, and I've found a picture of textbooks and kind of put the buttons with the textbooks. So this is a decorative use of hotspots. The image itself isn't enhancing the learning, it's just creating a bit of visual flair, and it's reinforcing the textbook thing. And as they click on it, they'll get the information that was in the text earlier, and they can kind of work their way through it. Equally, I could have done something from PowerPoint. So I often go into PowerPoint and use PowerPoint Smart Art to do a little stylized layout of icons. So I might go into PowerPoint and create my 5 headings or 4 headings, early use of textbook, use Smart Art to create some rectangles or some different layouts with it, save that as an image, upload that image into Hotspot, and then overlay my markers onto the rectangles or the circles that came from the Smart Art. And it's a nice way to kind of create a little custom interaction for yourself. Obviously, you can also use a hotspot when you're actually explaining an image, like a screenshot or a document. But in this case, I'm just thinking of pure text. So this is a way for me just to get something that's a little different and get some imagery mixed in with my text as they go. And if I look at how I created this, so if I just go down to that element here, I've just created the image, and then I can drag these hotspots to wherever I want them to fit in. Since we have a stock image library, it's really easy for me to change that up. So if I just search for textbooks again, and we could use this one here instead, import that. And now just kind of drop my markers in some new locations for people. And once again, I've kind of changed that up just to get that little bit of color onto my page. So Mel's asked in Q&A, to lighten the load, do you use a consistent type of interaction throughout the topic? That's a really good question. Yes and no. It's a Goldilocks answer. I don't want to use just one type of interact forever, because that's also a little boring. And sometimes we do just need to engage people with a little bit of, oh, this is a bit different. But equally, we don't need to do a demonstration of every possible element in tribal habits in every single topic. Because it is good that they are familiar with an interaction and they don't have to learn new interactions again. So maybe we're looking for a good balance between those things. I'm also looking for what suits the content. And a good example of that, I'll come back to the narration, is when I'm doing an either or. Often in text, I'm talking about either ors, scenario 1 versus scenario 2, do versus don't, correct versus incorrect, etc. We have a column element, which is text but in columns, which is very good for comparing things. Or the tab element. I really like the tab layout and interact for comparisons. And you can put in about 4 tab buttons. So tabs are good for comparisons, but I'm kind of thinking flip cards are good when there's a strong relationship between the front and back, or the title and the content. Buyback is good when it's kind of like simple one words and about the same amount of content. And then accordion or lists are good when there's a flow of information. So I guess what I'm trying to talk about is kind of driving my choice of interaction. But yeah, I agree, Mel. I don't want to go too overboard with this, because each new interaction is a little bit of work for them. The last little interaction you can do is narration. So you've probably all seen narration, because everyone on the call looks like they are topic creators. So narration is where we take text and a slide and we create something that's a bit like a video. And so you can press play and pause and it will play through things. And there will be a AI reading through the content. This is actually a text element for me. So simply what I'm doing here is I'm copying and pasting in my paragraphs of text as the audio for each slide. So here I've made 4 slides and they're just using the text out of Wikipedia. And I'm just putting an appropriate amount of content per slide. I like each of my slides to be around 10 to 15 seconds. So there's a fair amount of movement. And then I've just gone to the stock image library and I search for Socrates and put in something for it. And so I've created a little video out of text. So I've just turned that text into a media-based element. And that's a good thing to break up stuff as well. Since it has built-in closed captions, if somebody doesn't have audio, they can still follow along and read it here. And it's essentially just going to take them through the slides of text as they go through. So if I look at hotspot element, all the different layouts in interact, narration, and columns, we have a lot of different ways where we can make the text much more interactive than simply presenting it. In all of these cases, though, the interaction is just the user working their way through it, moving themselves through it, having that physical relationship. They're moving the mouse, they're moving their eyes and focusing on different things. All of that is helping with learning. But we could do something slightly different in the engagement area where we talk through more activating the brain. So text engagements for me is where I'm going to take text, but rather than just give them the text, I'm going to ask them to do something, then I will give them the text. So this is my favorite way to work with a lot of text. So here's an example. What do you think are the main components in the cost of a textbook? I'm obviously about to tell them that. And I could just say, here are the main components in the cost of a textbook. But in this case, I'm going to get them to think. I'm going to know paper, distribution, IP. And they're going to lock in that answer. And now I'm going to reveal to them what the information is. So this is just text down here. And I could have just put that in a text element and displayed it. But by doing this, I've kind of activated their brain and they're kind of curious as to what the answer is. And I've made them stop and think before I give them the answer. And I'm often looking for this opportunity. Again, this is load. Asking them a question is load. So I don't want to do that every single time I've got text, or they're going to just get frustrated with me, particularly when this isn't necessarily important learning at this point. This is more about engagement and just activating their brain. But sometimes before giving them information, I want to do that. Another option might be, let's say I'm going to run through in the next parts some examples of benefits or costs or practicalities or scenarios. I'm going to give them a lot of content. I might ask them to think, what do you think we're going to cover? So here, what are your 2 major concerns when it comes to buying textbook? And perhaps in the next sections, I'm going to address major concerns they have. And so people might type, I don't know, price and relevance or utility. Lock in their answer. And now I'm going to reveal to them what we're going to cover. Fantastic. Most people answer these things here. Is that what you answered? In the sections below, that's what we're going to cover. So it's a way to kind of tease the information that's coming, get them thinking and positioning in their mind. Oh yeah, okay, well, I hope we're going to cover these things. And then when they see that, they're reinforced. Oh, that's good. That was on my mind. I'm really going to pay attention to that section. Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that problem. So this is a nice little introduction section before we then get into the detail. You can do the same things with polls. Often if I have data that I want to present, X% of people do this, or did you realize that this was a problem? I like people to guess at those answers first. So I might then think here, how fast do you think the price of textbooks has risen in the last 20 years? And they're like, oh, I don't know, at the rate of inflation? No, that's incorrect. And people go, why? Why is that incorrect? And now they have a bit of a read and they're like, oh, it's twice the rate. I didn't realize that. And then they kind of read why. This is all just text. It's just presented now as some context to give them a comparison. So they took a view, I reveal the answer, and they're like, oh, it's more interesting. And that context, that relationship is driving the improvement in their learning. But still, really, we're just working with text here. We've just made it more engaging. Last thing I'll cover today, because 30 minutes passes very quickly in these sessions, is that concept of insights. So insights are a special element in tribal habits. If we go to part 4 and look at that, so insights are these little sound bites where you can give a label. So when I create an insight, I can give it one of these labels and then type in a reasonably small amount of information, and it pops that information out in a special lot of formatting. It also changes the font, which catches people's attention. Plus, insights can be copied into people's journals. So when they're looking at an insight, they can press the favorite button. It copies it into their journal down here, which means they have a copy of that information for later. So they can email it to themselves or use it to review later on in their work. I like to use insights for a couple of reasons. First of all, if I present media, so if I present a hotspot or interact or narration, where some key information is kind of buried within that, I may repeat that exact same important information underneath as an insight. So in this narration, I know there's 5 or 6 slides going through content. I might have decided there's 2 bits of really critical information I don't want people to miss. I'm going to reinforce them down here again. So they'll hear it in the narration and see it here in the insight, and it gives them a chance to favorite it. And there's nothing wrong with repeating information as you go through, particularly if it's important. Sometimes I group a lot of insights together. For instance, I can do a frequently asked questions section. So here I've got frequently asked questions. I'm just going to use a whole ton of insights on FAQs. And this is reducing learner load because there's a consistency here. I'm grouping things together and they're kind of working their way through question, answer, question, answer. And I might do 4 or 5 of these in a row and just group them all together. It makes sense for them. It's easy to understand and they can kind of favorite them as they go. I can do a similar thing with common mistakes to avoid. If you've done any of our development library modules, which I've written probably half of them, I use this a lot. When I'm teaching skills or processes, I often have a best practices or common mistakes section where I put a whole lot of insights. And I usually say, have a read through. If something catches your attention, favorite it into your journal. Because now they're looking through, they're looking for those things to favorite. In addition, you could turn on insight battles now in any section that have lots of insights. And that creates a nice little interaction where we present 2 insights and they have to choose which one is more valuable to them, which is a great way to reinforce things. So if someone heard it in a narration and then read it and then got this insight battle, you're really driving home key information, which is what insights are all about, key information. Insight battles are now super easy to turn on. You just tick this box in the section element and it puts an insight battle at the end of that section. And it will draw insights from anywhere in this particular point you're working on to create a bit of randomness. So usually if I see a point which has got 5 or 6 insights in it, I kind of look for a section and turn on insight battles just to drive home that key information. And that was 30 minutes, like that, of getting into detail around how to work with text. Everyone's probably having lunch, so I'm not going to go overtime with us today. I am going to hang around though and answer any questions. So if you have particular questions or scenarios you'd like to discuss today on text, feel free to hit the chat box or the Q&A and ask away. Alternatively, I'll be back in a few more weeks where we're doing our next best practices section on video. So we're going to talk about creating videos and using videos and the best way of working all with them. And if you've got a particular best practices section you'd like me to run next year, because we're mapping out our calendar at the moment, feel free to send me an email or let us know. Otherwise, thanks to you for coming. I'm going to pause the recording there and end the official session. Hang around and ask questions if you've got them. Otherwise, have a great day.